It's a process. We have so many different things that we're considering. First of who knows how many of these videos I will make before we actually move. It's a process. We have so many different things that we're considering. I know I just did my makeup and I feel like I still don't know how to apply makeup. We are going to different neighborhoods today. I ran a 5K this morning, had breakfast. We went out to some restaurant, Sam Am in Jersey City, which is one of our places that we're thinking about as a possibility too. But this is where we are in the process. We are right now going to go look at different neighborhoods in where we think we might want to live and see what it's like. There's some open houses that start at 1, so we're gonna check those out. I think before we even get into we should look into buying here, we need to know, what is this neighborhood like? Can we see ourselves living there? That is kind of the first, not the first. The first step that I haven't shared and really will be part of this first episode in the moving series is calculating the numbers. How much can you afford? How much do you want to pay, right? I think those two are not necessarily the same number, right? Because quote unquote, you could afford more than you want to pay. We had to figure out, what are we comfortable paying monthly for housing? And I think at least for me, I don't know why I do this, but I'm more comfortable paying a higher monthly cost if I own the home versus me being like, yeah, I'm gonna pay $2,800 to rent a 2-bedroom. Like, I don't wanna do that. But I'm like, oh, $2,800 plus, because the mortgage is just the minimum of what you're gonna pay to buy my house, to own a house. Yeah, I'll do that. Sign me up. Ari.
What's up?
It's our moving series.
Oh, nice. Cool.
Oh, you're not in focus.
To go to the bathroom.
Oh. It's nice to come see something in the rain because you're like, is it cute even when it's raining out?
Yep.
Yeah, this is cute. Falafel, gyro, open houses were a success in getting us to talk about what we might want. But this is not going to happen overnight. But it's good to get this process started. I wanted to share a little bit more about how we are thinking about this and kind of the general recommended approach that people talk about when they talk about how much should you actually be spending on housing related things. And for us, the first step in even thinking about what we do next for our moving out phase of life, and that's why this is part of what is in the first episode of the Moving Out series, is understanding the numbers. What does it actually mean to move out in terms of affordability? Like, what do you want to pay? And for us, it's important to look at the numbers first, right? You need to have an understanding of what actually are you comfortable spending money on for housing stuff. And so whether we are renting or decide to buy, we need to know what that looks like. So I'm going to share my screen and kind of walk through what our spreadsheet looks like and how we've really thought about this. And first things first is the top section. This is where we are calculating that recommended 28%. It is recommended that you keep all housing related cost to 28% of your income, your gross income. We did gross income and net to see what those differences were if we were trying to be like super conservative and use the net. But for the purposes of this video, let's just talk about the gross. So based on what income we make and our salaries, the recommended for us in a monthly housing total is $4,100. That would be under 28% of, or at 28% of our income. If we're just looking at my income alone, it's 26. If we're just looking at Ari's alone, it'd be 14, almost 15. We also wanted to think about what are our priorities and different goals that we have every year that we want to be able to hit, right? So we like to invest in our 401k. We like to invest in our Roth IRA. We like to travel, so we want to be saving for travel. We like to give gifts, so we want to have a gift fund. Life insurance, I pay for my parents' life insurance, so that's a line item here, and car insurance. Knowing all of that and knowing how much it costs, what does that look like on a monthly basis? So I put that total here, except for this other investment, which is like if we're really trying to go hard, that's how much we'd need to have. Okay, so given that, we are looking at a reach savings goal of $5,800 a month, $5,850 minimum. If we are investing less, not saving as much to travel, then it looks like $36.83. That's kind of like what we prefer to save and invest and what we would be minimally willing to save and invest. And then we also have what's our income versus our spending versus our savings. We have a monthly income category and we have a monthly spending. Let's go through the monthly spending. So we know that housing, I don't even know how to talk through this without like jumping from the spreadsheet, but housing, we have picking it up from a different category, which is actually aligns perfectly with the 28% that's recommended, but it's actually calculating this based on a mortgage breakdown calculator that we have set up here. So that can change, right? Like that number is dependent on whether we are looking at a mortgage, whether we're renting. But let's say this other spending is what I've taken from our Monarch, which I have made countless videos. I'll link them all here for you to see. Our spending on average is like $3,500 to $4,000 some months. So let's just say our spending is $35,000 for this purpose. And our housing, if we decided to buy, was $4,175. Our total spending as a couple would be $76.75. Our income together is $11,000. So this top is really just calculating what we make minus what we spend, what we want to save minimum, and we're at a deficit. So clearly something's got to change here, and this is where people get stuck. They start paying a lot on housing, and then they're not able to save as much as they want or take the trips that they want to take. And for us, we are reaching or trying to reach financial independence. And so it's important for us to really hit that reach investing goal. And so that means housing is going to need to be a lot less than what is recommended in the 28%. And that's why this calculator and the spreadsheet is really important, because it helps us understand, well, what can we actually do? What can we actually do? Is buying a house, because the conversation is, do we want to buy? Do we want to rent? Do we want to, what do we want to do? And in order to figure that out, we have to take everything into consideration. And so that leads me to the next piece of it on the right. Technically, the money we have available for the purposes of a down payment is $36,000. And some of that money is invested in a brokerage account. So that's $33,000 right now. Of course, it's invested, so that could change. That $33,000 could become $30,000. So being a little risky leaving that still invested. And then we have a total of savings for down payment specific things at $36,000. This does not include our emergency fund savings, because you do not want to use your emergency fund for a down payment, because if you put all your emergency fund towards a down payment, then you don't have an emergency fund. And then you just bought a house and you have no savings to take care of you if something were to break in the house. So what we have available that is allotted for a down payment is that $36,000. And we wanted to break down what it could look like to buy a house. Okay, let's say we want to buy a house that's $500,000. What does that look like to put down 20%? What does it look like to put down 10%? What's the average interest rate? What could we expect for taxes? And we've done a breakdown by different categories. So if we put down 20% and we include the taxes and insurance, we're looking at a payment of $41.75 per month just for housing related stuff, not including a repair, right? This is just the mortgage, tax, and insurance. So that's pretty high for us, and we don't have $100,000 saved for an investment. So we wanted to put it all on a spreadsheet to try to understand, what can we actually do? That is important. You have to know what money is available for you to make your plans. We're still undecided on what path we will go towards, but I think the way we've been thinking about it is really reflected in the spreadsheet, in that we want to be able to continue to travel, invest, and we have to take into account what we currently have available to us for a down payment, so that we can decide, okay, so should we be saving more cash, right? Because as you saw in one of my last videos, I have a priority of maxing out that 401k for the end of the year. So I wanted to show you the spreadsheet because I think it is an important conversation to have when you're thinking about moving out. What can you afford? What are you comfortable paying for? And what makes sense for your own financial situation right now? Let's talk about the scarcity limiting beliefs that I have around buying a house, because it really just ties to the buying a house component. I don't feel this way when it comes to renting. Maybe I act in scarcity when I think about what we want to pay for when it comes to a rental, but I don't think I have the same scarcity mindset and limiting beliefs I have with renting as I do with buying a house. And of course, there are the external factors that come into play, right? Unaffordability in the housing market right now is a real issue. Interest rates are higher, yes, it definitely is harder to buy a house, but people are doing it, right? It's not impossible. So there are the external things like that play into this limiting belief scarcity that I have when I think about buying my own home one day. But then there are those internal things, the money scripts, the money stories that we have about from our childhood about things like buying a house, owning a house. And just left my parents, so this is really actually top of mind. But just thinking about what happened in my childhood to make me feel like something like a $2 million house, brownstone, in a city I'd like to live in is out of reach. And I use that specific example because I had a newsletter a couple weeks ago where I kind of shared these thoughts too, where I'm like, why do I have this scarcity mindset around buying? And it's really just because I mean, I think it's deeper than this, and I haven't really done the full work to understand. But when I was growing up, my parents had our main house, our first house that they bought when we were small. That was the house they were really proud of buying. And then when I became a preteen, we moved to the suburbs and they bought a second house, and they still own that first house. And at some point they bought a third house as an investment property, and their first house became an investment property too. So at some point in their lives, they had 3 houses. And they always lived paycheck to paycheck, always living above their means. And so it became to the point where we eventually lost the first house to foreclosure that they had ever purchased. And I think about that often because I always ask myself, is seeing my parents go through a foreclosure, not of their main home, because we weren't living there at the time, but of their first home, seeing them foreclose on that house, seeing them declare bankruptcy, does that impact the way that I feel about now how I want to think about buying a house? And I think it does. I think money stories, money experiences that we've had in childhood have a big impact on how we are with money. And there is no ignoring the fact that the way that my family and my parents managed their money influenced me to think about it completely differently. And I know that it feeds into me being so concerned about buying a house and then potentially needing to lose it and losing everything that I've worked hard for, that we worked hard for to build. So yeah, I think a lot of times we don't think about the internal stuff, the emotional pieces of it. Yes, the emotional piece of like wanting to move out. That's an emotional decision. Buying a home is an emotional decision. But what are the emotional things that are happening when you think about what kind of place you can afford, what kind of place you want? And so I try to balance that out when I'm like looking at something on Zillow and saying, wow, I'll never be able to afford that. And trying to shift my mindset. Trying to be like, well, how can I make sure that I can afford that if that's what I want? Yeah. Not sure how to segue from there, but it is something that I'm actively working on. It is something that I want to make sure that I continue to work on and take active note that I'm doing, because it's important for me to be able to dream freely. It's important for me to look at something and say, I can do that. I can do that. But I'm so stuck on this how I can't right now. And so that's something that I wanted to just share. Haven't found the solution to it. I will obviously talk more through this series of moving out, how I'm managing with the scarcity mindset that comes up when we're thinking about where we live next. But yeah, just something on my mind.